What could make the most feared warriors in medieval Europe tremble with dread? What mysterious force could turn hardened Norse raiders, men who terrorized coastlines from Ireland to Constantinople, into superstitious whispers around campfires? The answer lies buried in the frozen landscapes of the far north, in a story that has been almost entirely erased from our understanding of the Viking Age. While Vikings dominate our imagination as the unchallenged predators of early medieval Europe, history tells a more complex tale. In the vast primeval forests and snow-covered tundra of the far north, there existed a people so enigmatic, so perfectly adapted to their harsh environment, that they became the stuff of Norse nightmares. A tribe that not only resisted Viking expansion, but actively terrified the terror-bringers themselves. These were the Bjarmians, a mysterious people who inhabited what is now northern Finland, northwestern Russia, and the Kola Peninsula. By the 9th century, Viking expansion had reached fever pitch. Norse warriors had established footholds across Europe, from Ireland to Constantinople. Their technological superiority, those revolutionary longships, allowed them to strike anywhere along Europe's waterways. Their martial culture created a society where reputation and honor were as valuable as gold. Yet despite this remarkable expansion, there remained regions that resisted Viking dominance. The dense forests and marshlands of what would later become Finland and northwestern Russia formed one such frontier. Here lay Bjarmaland, a region of perpetual snow and incredible hardship where, as one chronicler wrote, men practice arts unknown to Christian people. The Bjarmians were likely related to the Sami and Finnic peoples, but with distinct cultural practices. Archaeological evidence suggests they maintained a semi-nomadic lifestyle, following seasonal patterns of hunting, fishing, and trading. Unlike the hierarchical Norse society, Biamian communities were more egalitarian, with leadership based on skill, wisdom, and spiritual authority rather than hereditary claims. What made the collision between Vikings and Bjarmians particularly noteworthy was the complete reversal of the typical power dynamic. Throughout Europe, Vikings exploited their mobility and fearsome reputation to dominate superior forces. Yet in the far north, it was the Vikings who found themselves disoriented, vulnerable, and at a severe disadvantage. The Bjarmians' first advantage lay in their intimate mastery of one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. Imagine trying to navigate a snow-covered forest as a Viking warrior, a man raised in the coastal climate of Norway, accustomed to farming and seafaring rather than the deep mysteries of taiga and tundra. Archaeological evidence reveals a people who had developed sophisticated survival technologies. They moved across snow like spirits, reported one Arab traveler, their feet bound with strange devices that prevent them from sinking, pulling goods on sleds that glide where horses would founder and die. These strange devices were skis and snowshoes, technologies refined over millennia. Their clothing, constructed from layers of fur, leather, and woven plant fibers, provided superior insulation to Viking woolen garments. They understood which animal pelts worked best in different conditions: reindeer fur for extreme cold, sealskin for wet conditions, fox and marten for lightweight warmth. Most significantly, they had mastered rapid shelter construction, from semi-permanent winter lodges built underground for insulation to temporary structures erected in hours. This mobility allowed them to exploit seasonal resources across vast territories while remaining elusive to Norse raiders. The Bjarmians transformed environmental challenges into strategic advantages. Extreme cold became their ally, deep snows became highways for their movement, and limited forest visibility became their cloak of invisibility. What happens when the most feared warriors of the age encounter an enemy who refuses to fight on their terms? The Vikings had built their reputation on shock, aggression, and psychological intimidation. Their battles were typically decisive affairs, violent but brief confrontations where superior force determined clear victors. The Bjarmians rejected this entire paradigm. As one Byzantine diplomat observed, "They do not fight as men fight. They appear from nowhere, strike like lightning, and vanish like mist." Archaeological evidence supports this description. Unlike Viking burial sites with prominent displays of swords and shields, Bjarmian graves contain different weapons, lightweight hunting bows optimized for accuracy, slender spears designed for silent killing, knives with curved blades ideal for swift throat cutting. The Biamian combat doctrine rested on 5 principles that directly countered Viking strengths. First, absolute avoidance of direct confrontation. They recognized that in straightforward combat, the larger, better armored Vikings would likely prevail. Second, environmental manipulation. They constructed hidden pathways through impossible terrain, created disguised pit traps, and developed techniques for moving across frozen water that wouldn't support Viking weight. Third, psychological warfare. They deliberately cultivated an aura of supernatural mystery, leaving strange symbols carved in trees, arranging animal bones in ritualistic patterns, or positioning slain Vikings in ways that suggested otherworldly intervention. Fourth, targeted elimination. They specifically targeted Viking leaders, scouts, and sentries, anyone whose death would create maximum disruption with minimum risk. Fifth, coordinated withdrawal. They rarely attempted to hold ground, instead striking and immediately retreating to prepared positions. The effectiveness of these ghost warriors was so profound that it fundamentally altered Viking behavior. Norse sagas record instances where experienced warriors refused to venture into Bjarmian territory regardless of potential wealth or glory. Perhaps more devastating than physical attacks was the psychological warfare the Bjarmians waged against Viking minds. They understood what modern military theorists call psychological operations, the use of fear, uncertainty, and cultural dissonance as weapons. The Bjarmians operated from a fundamentally different spiritual worldview. While Norse religion acknowledged magic and supernatural forces within a structured cosmology, Bjarmian spirituality was more fluid, pervasive, and integrated into daily life in ways Vikings found incomprehensible. Their shamanic practices included elaborate trance-inducing ceremonies where participants appeared to transform into animals. To Vikings witnessing these rituals, it seemed the Bjarmians could literally shapeshift, a transgression of natural categories that suggested dangerous spiritual power. Most disturbing of all were their mummification practices. Unlike Vikings who cremated or buried their dead, Bjarmians preserved important individuals using smoke, cold, and plant-based resins. These mummified ancestors were kept in sacred structures and consulted through elaborate rituals. To Norse eyes, it appeared the Bjarmians lived alongside their dead, violating the natural order. The Bjarmians recognized the psychological impact of their practices and deliberately amplified it. They positioned carved spirit posts along Viking approach routes and staged supernatural encounters designed to convince Norse warriors they faced otherworldly enemies. This psychological dimension created what sagas call the Bjarmian dread, a specific fear that affected even veteran warriors. Men who had stood unflinching in conventional battles would panic at every sound in Bjarmian forests, wake screaming from nightmares, or refuse to stand watch alone. Despite the conflict, a complex economic relationship existed between these peoples. The Bjarmians controlled access to some of medieval Europe's most valuable commodities: Arctic fox furs worth more than their weight in gold, walrus ivory, amber, and exotic medicinal substances. This created a fundamental tension. Vikings coveted these northern treasures but found direct access extraordinarily dangerous. 3 distinct patterns emerged. First, direct trade at established boundary markets during sacred truces, when both cultures agreed to peaceful exchange under spiritual protection. Second, indirect trade through intermediaries who specialized in northern commerce, though this meant paying premium prices. Third, attempted trade raiding. Viking expeditions trying to seize Bjarmian stockpiles by force. These invariably resulted in devastating counterattacks that made such raids prohibitively costly. The Bjarmians, through their effective resistance, maintained economic autonomy throughout the Viking Age, controlling the flow of valuable northern commodities despite Norse military superiority elsewhere. One of the most disruptive aspects of Viking-Bjarmian interaction was the collision of gender norms. Norse society, while allowing women certain rights, maintained strict gender segregation in warfare, political leadership, and most religious authority. The Bjarmians operated differently. Archaeological evidence shows female burials containing hunting implements, shamanic tools, and leadership symbols. Norse accounts frequently mention witch women or female war leaders who commanded both spiritual and martial power. This confrontation with female authority profoundly unsettled Viking warriors, challenging their fundamental assumptions about gender and power. Many Norsemen dealt with this by attributing Bjarmian women's capabilities to supernatural forces rather than acknowledging female competence that contradicted their worldview. Over time, this exposure to Bjarmian gender practices influenced Norse culture, particularly in regions with strong northern trade connections. The evolution of Valkyrie imagery in Norse literature, from simple battlefield spirits to complex figures wielding both weapons and magic, likely reflects this cultural exchange. The climactic confrontation came in 1026 CE when King Olaf II of Norway launched the largest military expedition ever mounted against Bjarmian territory. Motivated by religious zeal and economic ambition, Olaf assembled 15 ships and nearly 500 warriors, a massive force by early medieval standards. Initially, the campaign proceeded smoothly. The Bjarmians employed scorched earth tactics, evacuating settlements in the invaders' path. As Olaf's forces penetrated deeper into their territory, psychological warfare intensified, scouts disappeared, strange sounds echoed through forests, and apparitions watched from the trees. The trap was sprung at what the Norse called the Sacred Lake, likely Lake Onega. The Bjarmians had constructed an elaborate deception. Temporary buildings designed to resemble a prosperous settlement when viewed from a distance, with gleaming roofs of polished birch bark or mica. As Olaf's ships approached this fake settlement, the Bjarmians unleashed a sophisticated multi-phase ambush. Fire arrows carrying an early form of Greek fire, a mixture of pine resin, animal fat, and sulfur, struck the Viking fleet. Warriors emerged from hidden underground passages on the island. The river behind the Vikings was blocked with felled trees, preventing retreat. The most devastating element was chemical warfare. The Bjarmians exploited natural sulfur deposits in the lake basin, creating a toxic cloud of sulfur dioxide that flowed across the water toward the trapped fleet. Combined with conventional attacks, this proved catastrophic. Only 2 ships and fewer than 60 men escaped. King Olaf himself survived, but never fully recovered his health. This defeat marked the end of large-scale Viking military operations against Bjarmian territories. The 12th and 13th centuries brought profound changes to Northern Europe. The consolidation of Christian kingdoms, the rise of new trading powers, and territorial expansion by Novgorod and other Russian principalities created pressures that gradually transformed the Viking-Bjarmian relationship. The old pattern of raiding and ambush gave way to more normalized relations. Trading posts evolved from defensive structures to integrated settlements. Christian churches appeared in Bjarmian territories, though often incorporating traditional spiritual elements. Both cultures faced new external threats that made their ancient enmity impractical. Pragmatic alliances emerged against common enemies, with defensive structures built through Norse-Bjarmian cooperation. However, both cultures struggled with the changing medieval world. The Viking Age effectively ended by the mid-11th century, with Norse societies becoming conventional medieval kingdoms. The Bjarmians faced even greater challenges. Their semi-nomadic lifestyle, shamanic practices, and decentralized organization increasingly conflicted with emerging centralized states. Environmental pressures compounded these difficulties. Traditional hunting grounds were claimed by expanding states, forcing settlement pattern changes. By the late 13th century, distinct Bjarmian identity was increasingly subsumed. Some communities incorporated into Novgorod, others migrating westward to merge with related populations, still others moving farther north, seeking to preserve independence. The Bjarmians never defeated the Vikings in conventional terms. They never sailed to Norway or conquered Swedish territories. Their victory lay in something more subtle, but no less significant: the preservation of their autonomy and way of life against overwhelming odds. In the frozen forests of the far north, they created a domain where even the fearsome Vikings tread with caution and dread. Through environmental mastery, Asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, and cultural practices that unnerved their opponents, they transformed apparent disadvantages into powerful defensive assets. Their story offers a counter-narrative to simplistic views of Viking expansion, demonstrating that Norse dominance was neither universal nor inevitable. Even at the height of their power, the Vikings encountered peoples who successfully resisted through superior local adaptation and innovative tactics. The true legacy of the Bjarmians lies not in monuments or written records, but in proving that cultural survival doesn't always require victory in conventional terms. They made the cost of domination prohibitively high, forcing accommodation rather than submission. In doing so, they preserved their identity for centuries against one of history's most successful expansionist cultures. The ghosts of the Bjarmians, those watchers in the White Forest who once struck terror into Norse hearts, may have faded into the mists of history. But their legacy endures in the complex cultural tapestry of the North and in the important lesson they provide, that even the most formidable powers can be successfully resisted by those who truly understand their environment and are willing to defend it with unwavering determination. This is the forgotten story of the people who terrified the Vikings, a tale of resistance, adaptation, and the triumph of the human spirit against seemingly impossible odds. Thank you for watching this forgotten story. We hope you enjoyed learning about the remarkable Bjarmians. If you found this tale intriguing, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more hidden histories. Your support helps us bring these incredible stories to light.